So we're trying to tackle, the landlord-tenant relationship, which, has um, challenges, particularly in this energy efficiency, renewable energy space. In fact, I posted this on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and one of my friends, Brett Little, who runs the Green Home Institute in Ann Arbor, Michigan, responded saying, "Well, good luck with that. It's been impossible for us to make contact with landlords." And the challenge is, what's known in the energy efficiency space, the split incentive. So when a landlord isn't paying the utility bills and the tenant is, what's the what's the motivation for the landlord to make energy efficiency or renewable energy improvements, or even to provide, an outlet for electric vehicle parking, um, which is becoming more and more of a need in the tenant landlord relationship. So Brianna's on here right now. She works for me with Sustainable Real Estate Consulting Services. She has an electric vehicle. She just rented a property in Boston, and there was no availability for EV charging. So we're seeing these kinds of topics pop up in the marketplace. And it's been a hot marketplace too, particularly here in Massachusetts. But I think across the United States, we're hearing the same things. There's no inventory in the sales market right now. It's very hard for sellers to, leave mortgages in which they may have refied down to very low rates. I mean, I did a cash out refi for my home in Melrose, Massachusetts, which you'll hear about in a little bit. So we could put a lot of money into the property to improve it. And luckily I did that in late summer 2021, and I got a 2.625, rate, 2.6%. Now that rate is around 7%. So it's very tough for sellers, in this space to think about, my God, I've got this great rate because I refied down to 2.5% to 3%. Now, if they go to buy, if they don't, or if they're not able to buy cash, they're hit with much higher rates. So there's a lot of challenges here in this real estate marketplace, and of course that rolls down to tenants. We've got plenty of data through National Association of Realtors, through the National Association of Home Builders, depending on whose numbers you believe, we're 4 to 6 million buildings short in the United States of where inventory should be to have kept up with demand over the last decade in particular. So that means, it's more challenging to buy homes, it's more challenging to rent homes. The landlord and the sellers are in the driving seat. So what's the motivation for landlords out there to make these improvements? Well, there is some good new information to share to landlords out there in this space, particularly with the passage. And we didn't plan this. So by we, Susan Hogue, Lisa Smith, Mimi, Brianna, and I, we didn't plan to do this on the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, which it just happens to be today. But a lot has happened in that 1 year due to that act signed into law by President Biden. And it gives homeowners and income property owners great chances to have the federal government invest in your properties to improve them in this energy efficiency and renewable space. So we're going to be talking about a lot about that as we go through here. And on top of that, there are so many incentives in this state, the state of Massachusetts. I know Kerry Langley's on here. He's from Atlanta, Georgia. So it's great that we're getting people from different parts of the US joining us for this presentation. But in Massachusetts, we have so many strong incentives through the Mass Save program, through National Grid, through Eversource, through our investor-owned utilities, through our state, through Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, that they almost sound like they're too good to be true, you know. And I think when landlords or homeowners hear about these things, it's almost hard to believe that the federal government or the state or the utility is actually pitching in the way that they are to improve property. So we're gonna talk about that as we go through today's presentation as well. And, you know, as we know, the landlord-tenant relationship has always been challenged, no matter how hot the market it is, like it is right now. You know, if you Google landlord-tenant relationship, I mean, you'll find hundreds of articles on this topic. So if there are hundreds of articles showing up in Google, you know that there's a problem, right? I mean, it's clear that that's always been a challenge. And, you know, personally, I've experienced it from both sides, the challenges from both sides of the equation, both as a landlord and as a tenant. So I was down in grad school at the University of Florida in the 80s. And I had a friend of mine, a buddy of mine that was in the same program I was, from New Hampshire. I was from Maine. And so we found this cheap apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, to be able to rent. We thought, okay, this is great. We can afford this while we're in grad school. Well, it was cheap because the air conditioning didn't run. And in North Central Florida in the summer, that is no fun. Let me just say that straight out, having no air conditioning, you know. And we couldn't, you know, we'd contact the landlord. Of course, we never get a call back, but if we didn't pay the rent, we knew we were going to get booted. So, you know, it's hard on that end for tenants. And then from a landlord perspective, you know, I have had, you know, one in particular really horrible situation with a tenant in which, you know, it cost me, after I was finally able to get her out of the property in Massachusetts, which is difficult to do in this state. There are a lot of laws that really favor the tenant, but when I finally got her out of the unit, it cost me $50,000 to get the unit just back into shape. I mean, guys with hazmat suits showing up, right? So I get this from both sides of of this perspective. I just think that there are ways to improve this relationship. Creating good tenants, long-term tenants, can be the benefit for both parties, obviously. And investing and improving in your property for whenever you go to sell, particularly with some of the improvements that we're going to be talking about as we work our way through this today, also have the benefit of higher resale value. We've got lots of data on that, as well as the benefit of having better tenant relationships as well. So this is the coalition that you're talking to right now is the Cape Ann Climate Coalition and my firm, Sustainable Real Estate Consulting Services. We were funded by a generous grant by Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, Mass CEC, to engage landlords, particularly in the Cape Ann section of Massachusetts. So Carrie, if you don't know where that is, you probably know where Cape Cod is. That's south of where we are, kind of north of Boston. There's a little arm that's a cape that runs out into the Atlantic Ocean, where Gloucester and Rockport are. And that's the section of the world that we've been tackling. In particular, Gloucester, Massachusetts, because there's some interesting, it's an interesting marketplace. It's a well-known fishing village, big Portuguese community. Probably 50% of the income producing homes, the multi-family homes, are in environmental justice areas in Gloucester, and 50% are market rate. So some affordable housing needed. So we're gonna, you know, Derek will do a deep dive on some of the incentives that are available for both the affordable housing section for landlords that are in those areas, and for market rate as well. But I would like to, before I move on from this slide, just give a super big thank you for the Cape Ann Climate Coalition and the city of Gloucester as well. The city of Gloucester is really doing some great things to engage their community on successful, sustainable home ownership. And part of that mission is driven by this great nonprofit, Cape Ann Climate Coalition. I really can't say enough about their innovation, what they're doing with a volunteer force to be able to help people understand heat pumps, the HVAC technology that is really changing the HVAC industry in a huge way. You'll hear I converted to heat pumps in a little bit when I talk about the work that I did for my own home in Melrose, Massachusetts. But Cape Ann Climate Coalition is just a great resource. So you're going to hear me talking a lot about them and as we go through this presentation. And for those of you in and around the Cape Ann area, they are there for you. They're part of my fear is with a lot of these things, like I said, they sound a little bit too good to be true, some of these incentives that are offered. And on top of that, sometimes you can get involved with these programs, you try to call somebody, you try to stay in, and you never get any kind of response back. And my fear is sometimes people just throw up their hands and say, you know what, screw this, is too complicated. The best thing that Cape Ann Climate Coalition is doing is creating a resource. They may not know all the answers immediately, but they usually know the people to be able to talk to solve problems. And that in this space is such a great asset for the community. I really can't speak highly enough about the Cape Ann Climate Coalition. So if there's one takeaway from this, you're going to see Lisa Smith's email in a few slides. Grab that email and contact Lisa if you're interested in any of these opportunities that are out there. And I know, Derek, you mentioned to me, and you can talk about this later, but you mentioned that you've had people contact you from these presentations out in that neck of the woods because they have somebody that they can go to through Mass Save that understands what's going on. And that human touch is so important in a world in which more and more, we get generic answering messages and, we get calls back from, computers. They're not even people. And I don't know. I find that really frustrating. I'm kind of an old timer, I guess, but I find that really frustrating to have actual people, to be able to talk to move the ball forward. I think is just critically important. Cape Ann Climate Coalition is absolutely killing it there. Can someone help me? CACC, that stands for Cape Ann Climate Coalition, right there. You're going to see that quite a bit. So this presentation, is kind of dealing with two things primarily, right? The ability to take control of your side of the utility meter is underrated. We've got to get this message out as much as possible. You're going to hear about that on the next slide. And then the slide after that, we're going to go into carrots and sticks. And for me personally, as a realtor and somebody that believes in the free marketplace, I like carrots. I like incentives, but unfortunately, and, we've got a climate crisis and the built environment is a big contributor to that problem. And, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, Susan and I were on a different webinar, and there was a strong movement towards, the leaders on that call that, look, landlords just don't get it. So we got to bring the sticks. We got to bring the sticks and hammer them over the head with this stuff, right? So I think, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the sticks that are out there, one quick frame for you to think about, and then go on into all the carrots. But my advice to you as a landlord in the state of Massachusetts is don't wait for the sticks to come. Start to deal with some of this stuff before we see legislative action that mandates work being done, and start to make some of these improvements on your own. So, this is just a really easy picture, I think, to understand. Kind of on the right side of this diagram is the supply side for the electric grid only. Obviously, there's a natural gas grid for heating homes as well. That's part of this as well. But this is the electric grid, right? So down on the lower right-hand side, there's the renewable energy options that are out there. And obviously, wind power is becoming a bigger and bigger player in Massachusetts, particularly with the offshore wind farm that's going in now. Solar power, at the utility scale solar power. So when you're driving down the Mass Pike, you'll see, you'll run past these big solar fields that are out there. That's utility scale solar. Hydroelectricity above that, fossil fuel plants, coal, which we fortunately don't have any more of here in the state of Massachusetts, although there is a couple remaining in the ISO New England grid. Obviously, a lot of natural gas, power generation, a fossil fuel, some actually oil for peaker plants and diesel fuel oil plants that still operate as well. Nuclear power, we certainly have a few of those. Great thing about nuclear, of course, is it is carbon free, but there's a lot of risk that comes with that. We've seen a lot of nuclear power plants being hit with big cost runs because they're difficult to maintain. Obviously, it's dangerous stuff. And then on the left side of the chart, you see the demand side, factories, commercial buildings. Now, electric vehicles are part of the demand side of that as well. But what we're going to be really talking about is right in the middle here, homes, right? Which is a serious part of the demand on the power industry, on the supply side of the power industry. And I think what many people just are, for some reason, I think we need to do a better job of getting out there and explaining this to people. But there are such incredible opportunities to control our utility bills, to control the comfort in our homes, to control the health of our homes on our side of the utility meter, right? There's the supply side of the utility meter, all of the big power plants out there, 350 in New England, servicing the factories, the commercial buildings, the homes for New England residents. But there's the other side of the meter. There's the demand side of the meter. And we have the technology today to be able to improve these residential homes and income producing properties to lower demand on the grid. And that is such an essential part of this equation as we try to look forward to our 2030, 2040, 2050 goals, not only in the state of Massachusetts, not only in New England, but in the United States of America. And we have just great opportunities to control a volatile power marketplace. We saw that this last winter, right? Russia invades Ukraine. All of a sudden, the price of natural gas goes through the roof. 53% of New England's power comes from natural gas power plants. The rates spiked this last winter. Very volatile up here in the Northeast. Rates are high up here in the Northeast. We all know that, right? But there's also kind of an energy independence part of this, that we can control demand on our side of the meter. There's kind of energy security. We now have, all of the pieces in place with battery storage, with renewable energy generation, like solar PV on these homes, which stands for photovoltaics, turning the sun's photons into voltage electricity, which can power an entire home with net zero homes that are out there. We have an incredible ability for the New England, Massachusetts consumer to control the situation on their side of the meter. And I think we've got to do a much better job of getting that out to people. And I would also say, you'll hear this from me as you hear about my home improvements, but I also feel like for me personally, that's, you know, I'm fortunate because I own two homes. I've had a, you know, a successful real estate career. My wife's in healthcare. We've been lucky, you know, we could do a massive retrofit for our home. Not everybody has that ability, obviously. But if you do have that ability, I also feel like this is part of, for me anyway, my responsibility to be a good neighbor in my community and do what I can to lower the demand, to decarbonize my home and Melrose as well. I think this is about being a good community member, being a good neighbor. And again, that's why Gloucester is such a great community as well. Melrose, just so you know, is where all the cool people live. But Gloucester is just an incredible community you know, like I said, big Portuguese population, a fishing village from, you know, several centuries ago. There's just an incredible sense of community that's there. And I think this is part about being a good community member as well, what we've got to do. So here's, you know, the carrots and the sticks. I think we all know what this means, right? Carrots being incentives out there to encourage improvements, and the sticks being punishment, getting whacked, you know, by the federal government, by the state government for things that have to happen to meet some of the climate challenges that are out there. So here's just some examples of some of the sticks that we're seeing out there that are currently out there, or proposed legislation to move forward. One of them is a clean heat standard. So that would have a goal of replacing fossil fuels as a heating source in homes, existing and new construction by 2050. New construction, as Derek will talk about, we've kind of solved that, but the elephant in the room here is that 75 to 80% of the buildings that will be here in 2050 are here right now, right? So that is a huge challenge to decarbonization, moving away from fossil fuels, and to participating in the climate challenges that we have. There are a couple of bills that would move the administration of Mass Save away from the utilities, hopefully to make the program a little bit more efficient, but to really focus on building decarbonization. And we have an expert from Mass Save here with Derek, and he'll talk about the programs that are in place right now. You know, we've seen more aggressive building codes in this state. We adhere to the most rigorous building code that's passed in the United States on every 3 years. Right now, that's the International Energy Conservation Code 2021, IECC 2021, and energy conservation is part of the title of that code. So it's important. And the codes have moved forward rigorously here in the state of Massachusetts. On top of that, we've had a stretch code since Green Communities Act was passed in 2009, which is designed to be even more aggressive. But wait, there's more. Governor Baker last year signed into legislation a specialized stretch code, which is about, I think right now, 23 communities in and around Greater Boston have developed, which is a very, very, very rigorous stretch code that clearly moves builders away from fossil fuels in new construction and in residential homes to decarbonization using technologies primarily like air source heat pumps that do both the heating and cooling in my house. So I wasn't paying for two separate systems, I paid for one system. And then there's been a couple of bills in past sessions that would have required some kind of home energy score mandated at the time of sale. Those bills did not pass, but you can see that there's a will in the state legislature here in Massachusetts, because we realize we have challenges in front of us. We have a climate challenge. Massachusetts is setting itself up to be a climate leader, which, as things roll out here, Massachusetts being a climate leader, we're going to be in an awfully good space from an industry and a jobs perspective as we continue to move this stuff forward. But there's sticks out there. They're waiting to come, and they're coming, whether it's this session, 193rd session, or the 194th session, the next session, they're coming. So my, advice to property owners, to income producing property owners, is start to plan for this stuff now and use Cape Ann Climate Coalition to develop your plan. That's a great use of this great resource that you have up on Cape Ann, is using them to develop your plan over time, using the incentives that are available that we're going to talk about, some of the financing options that are available that we're going to talk about, to improve your property. And here's the real challenge. I think many people feel like, okay, if we switch to an electric vehicle, that'll be good. We'll get rid of gasoline in our car, and that'll be part of the climate solution. It is certainly part of the climate solution, but only 22% in the transportation sector. Look at that yellow section, building operations, which is our utility bills. 28% of United States greenhouse gas emissions and carbon usage coming from the homes, businesses that we live and work in, the buildings that we play in. And then in the new construction world, there's a carbon impact there, where 11% of building materials and new construction is also contributing to the climate challenges, to the greenhouse gas emission challenges. So that's 39%. And again, I think, it's so easy to think, well, I'll buy an EV and, that'll be good. I'll move the ball forward. I can feel good about myself. You can, absolutely. But the bigger challenge is in the homes that we live in, the properties that we own that are income producing properties, and the properties that we work in as well. So that's a big challenge out here. And here it is, right here. How do I get the money, Craig? Okay, enough of this chat, blah, 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 blah. Tell me how I get the money, right? What are the feds, the state, the utilities in Massachusetts? And we're lucky to have a couple of really great investor-owned utilities here in the state, and the municipalities like Gloucester how are they willing to help me improve my property? Well, I think you're going to be blown away with the rest of this presentation in terms of how much opportunity there is out there to start to make your improvements in your home. And the fact that the federal, state, municipal governments, the utilities are willing to help invest in you improving your home down these energy efficiency and renewable energy spaces. Part of that, right, we just saw back in the second frame here, the challenges of supplying all of this electricity to the grid. And as we add electric vehicles, that's obviously going to be a demand on the grid as well. So we really got to think about lowering consumption on the demand side of the meter, on our side of the meter. And here's just one example. And there's Lisa Smith's email right there, lisajsmith3000@gmail.com. She is the person, the guru that you want to talk about to figure out how you can get what I got for the improvements I made on my home. Look at that over on the right, $10,000 check in this massive renovation that we did. It was a big renovation. We moved the kitchen from one side of the building to the other. We took out one bath, added two more. So it was a big project, but that $10,000 made a huge difference. And that was specifically for switching from natural gas, which we had in our home. My wife Sally and I had natural gas in the Melrose 1895 Victorian that we own. And we had those, really crappy window AC units that were, I was talking to Sally about this yesterday. If we, had still had those window units in the home through this summer, which has been pretty hot, it would have been really brutal. It was so, we could keep a couple rooms comfortable, our bedrooms comfortable, but the rest of the house was just so uncomfortable to be in. And so instead of, and I asked my builder this, I said, John, what's it going to cost me to put in a new natural gas system? And I'm not going to do this level of renovation without having AC. But by the way, I don't have ductwork. So if you were doing this the traditional way, a new natural gas system, a separate AC system, adding ducts while we gutted the property, what was that going to cost me? And he just off the top of his head, he said 45,000. I said, well, what about this new technology? Air source heat pumps, ductless mini splits. We didn't have ductwork, like I said, so we put in 4 ductless mini splits in the home. What's that going to cost me? And he thought it would be 25,000 and actually came in at 24. But look, I got a $10,000 check back from Mass Save for decarbonizing the home. So the out-of-pocket expenses for the HVAC element of this was $14,000 versus $45,000, right? I think the other misconception in the marketplace is that we believe this green stuff is so expensive, but when I look at just the cost benefits of, I'm, my oil system is running out, I don't have AC, think about this. This is a smart improvement for you in your own homes and in your income producing properties. This is a way to make your tenants feel more comfortable and happy in their units out there. So Lisa J. Smith 3000 at gmail.com, right? That's a critical email for you, because if you're wondering how you can get your $10,000 or more, start that conversation with Lisa. And that's per unit. You want a 3-family, you could be in for some pretty big incentives out there to be able to move the ball forward and make your comforts happy, not only with the lower operating costs of their home, but also that it's more comfortable, it's quieter to live in, it's healthier to live in. There's a lot of benefits to this stuff besides just the lower operating costs of the home. So that's my home up there on the right. We believe that this photograph is from 1895 when the home was first built. It was when they were widening Main Street in Melrose. And you can see that there's an electric trolley running down the street, which is no longer there, unfortunately. But this idea of, electrification is not exactly new. We know how to do this, absolutely. But that house up on the right, up there on the first one on the hill up there, is mine. And I feel like we've probably added another 125 years of useful life of the home with the improvements that we've made. And more importantly, when my wife and I go to sell that home, whenever that may be, I feel like we're keeping up with a changing marketplace here in terms of latest HVAC technology, better building envelope. There were a lot of improvements that we made. Heat pump hot water heater. We went with an induction cooktop, which we now both absolutely love. We would never go back to natural gas at this point. And, here's the thing though, and Carrie can second me on this. This is the kind of thing that when I deal with appraisers, so I've got a home on the market in Concord, Massachusetts right now. Actually, it went under agreement. We had multiple offers, went under agreement yesterday. This is my home. This isn't the home in Concord. But if I can, after we get the purchase and sale sign, then I'll get a call from an appraiser who the buyer has to pay for, but really represents the bank, right? They represent the lender. They represent the investors in that bank. And the appraiser, no matter what the market, the meeting of the minds between the buyer and seller of what the seller's willing to sell the property for, what the buyer's willing to pay for the property, that's what we call the market price, right? The appraiser is going to come in, particularly in a tightening marketplace here, and do their own evaluation. In this case, we had multiple offers, so the price for this Concord home went above list price. Next week, I'm sure I'll get a call from an appraiser saying, hey, Craig, can I meet you Wednesday at 3 to come out? I want to take a look at the home. An appraiser. He or she is going to write a huge report, send it to the bank underwriter about what he or she thinks the actual value of the home is. That may be different than what the buyer and seller had for the agreement on the price. But the one thing that a qualified appraiser, so we have a bunch of appraisers in the state that have gone through the valuation of sustainable buildings program that the Appraisal Institute has. I will demand one of those appraisers when I go to list my home, because I've got this really quantifiable number. Annual savings, $3,711 annually for the savings of my home. So most realtors, when we talk to sellers about going to sell their home, we give them a comparative market analysis, which we use comps, right? We use comps preferably within the last 6 months, preferably in the same neighborhood, preferably the same number of bedrooms. You know, there's some slight variances that can go here, but we're trying to deliver 3 to 5 comps to the seller to say, this is what the market will bear for your home. For these valuation of sustainable buildings programs, those comps are important, but they can also use tools because they've been trained to do things like use a net present value for this $3,711 of annual cost savings that a third party, a HERS rater, has assigned to my home. Well, that could save a deal, that net present value of that number, for additional amounts. Maybe the appraiser doesn't agree with my comps. Maybe we're $10,000 to $20,000 off of what the buyer and seller has agreed to. Well, if there's a net present value of an additional, $35,000 or $40,000 from that $3,700 in annual savings, that can save a deal, right? So this is real in the real estate marketplace. These kinds of cost savings not only benefit you, your tenants, better relationships, but also when you go to sell, if you hire also competent realtors. Obviously, not every realtor is trained in this space, but we have plenty of NAR Green designated realtors in the state of Massachusetts that have been trained about some of the things that we've just been talking about. And we've got a dozen or so appraisers in the state, which I, as a competent realtor, will demand that we have a competent appraiser come to appraise a home with high performance features in it, like ductless mini splits, like a better building envelope, like a heat pump water heater, right? All of those add up to cost savings that if you have a competent realtor, they'll know how to control this process in the real estate transaction. All right, everybody's favorite date, April 15th. Yeah, I'm sure everybody would raise their hand if I said that was your favorite day of the year. It's my least favorite because I have a tax appetite, right? If I've had a good year as a real estate agent, I work for Lair Realty Partners as an independent contractor. So I get the gross commission amount, right? I've got to figure out how to save my taxes over the course of the year for that income coming in on my business. Practically every realtor feels the same way, right? Same thing with you landlords out there. You're getting a check, multiple checks every month that aren't being taxed. You got to put those in your account. You've got to deduct all your deductibles at the end of the year, and then you're going to owe something either quarterly at the end of the year. That's usually a pretty big number, right? So here is where we've got some really exciting stuff for you to start to think about as landlords, as owners of income producing properties. So this Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law by President Biden a year ago today, August 16th, 2022. Pretty exciting stuff. The 179D of the tax code was set to expire in 2021, but got extended through this Inflation Reduction Act. And 179D, in fact, I'll put in the chat an IRS link to 179D, is specifically for commercial building owners, which income producing property owners fit into that category. So if you haven't heard of this, or you haven't looked at the energy efficiency savings that are attributed with 179D of the US tax code, I recommend you and your tax accountant start to talk about this, because there are incredible opportunities in here. So, and these actually go back now. Part of the Inflation Reduction Act is that you can now look back even to improvements, I think, through 2020 and take tax savings off from energy efficiency, renewable energy improvements that you did on your property prior to the extension of 179D. But now 179D is offering some pretty lucrative up to $5 per square foot for new construction or retrofitted buildings as a tax write-off. So whatever I owe to the federal government this next year, I do a bunch of improvements, and let's say there's $15,000 worth of tax incentives that I'm taking advantage of. I get to deduct that off from what I owe the federal government. So that's pretty powerful. The federal government is really stepping to the plate to help you improve your property. At the commercial level, this does need to be certified by a third party. Now, I will note, too, for all of you folks out there that own a home and live in a single family home, which I'm sure our landlords do as well, there's the Inflation Reduction Act is really user-friendly for homeowners making improvements on their home. And if you go to this little link I have at the bottom, Rewiring America, they have a great IRA calculator. Just Google Rewiring America IRA calculator. It will pop up for you. There's 5 inputs to be able to put in to the calculator, and you will immediately see some of the tax incentives that are out there. For instance, if I put $20,000 of solar PV on my roof, the installed price of a solar PV system on my roof, which we will do probably next year at this point, I'll get to take $6,000, 30% off from that $20,000. I get to write off what I owe the federal government. That's a pretty powerful tax incentive for the realtors out here in the room, for any homeowner out there in the room that has some kind of tax appetite. Same kind of thing applies. It's a little bit more complicated because it's commercial properties, but that's under 179D of the U.S. tax code certificate that's out there. Like I said, you do need a third party for the commercial buildings to certify this, and there's a really user-friendly firm called Pearl Certification that has now been approved to be a third-party certifier for 179D of the tax code. When you think about third-party certifiers like LEED or Passive House or Energy Star, they're all pretty expensive to go through that certification process. Pearl Certification has really nailed this down to be ultra user-friendly, to be able to certify the work that you've done in your home. So I can't recommend this company enough either, because they've made it cost-effective to be able to do this. And here's just another little piece of this in terms of the added value of this. So this is the cost versus value report that Zonda does. They've been doing this for the last 37 years. This is very popular with realtors, right? Because I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone to meet with a homeowner about putting their home on the market, and they say, well, Craig, we did an extensive remodel of the kitchen back in 2012, and it was a $100,000 remodel. And so we want to add $100,000 to the list price because our kitchen is the best kitchen out there known to God. We get this all of the time, right? Well, the great thing about this cost versus value report is it really helps homeowners take a look at how quickly things depreciate. As soon as the homeowner lights up the stove for the first time, if they're using natural gas, the depreciation is 77%. So $100,000 goes to $77,000 pretty darn quickly. But look, there's some improvements out there that Zonda is saying is actually adding more value, over 100% of value. And the top of the line this year that Zonda reported was HVAC electrification. So this idea of using heat pumps to heat and cool your home, Zonda is saying actually adds more money than the installed cost for doing so. So just some interesting data out there if you're interested in that kind of thing. And then, now we're just going to get into some of the incentives that are out there that are so great. And I'm gonna toss this over to Derek so he can explain some of these to you. So go ahead, take it away, Derek.
Great, thanks, Craig. Yeah, just a quick little background. So I work on a mass save program.
Oh, you muted yourself somehow, Derek.
Huh. Okay.
We
Can you
lost
hear
you
me
after
now?
you work for the Mass. We can hear you now. Yeah.
All right. So
Oh, we got somebody from Colorado on the line too. Oh, that's great. Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading.
no problem. Um, so I work on a specific program for residential new construction, where we provide incentives for those types of projects. But Craig asked me to come and speak to you all about some other aspects of Mass Save, just because I've been involved in Mass Save for more years than I'd like to admit, and have a good base of knowledge of the different types of things that are offered throughout the different kind of branches of Mass Save. And so what I want to talk about today are income eligible and enhanced residential programs through the Mass Save retail rebates programs. So you're all probably familiar with kind of the standard Mass Save incentives and rebates that are out there. You probably can't miss the fact that there's a $10,000 heat pump rebate that's available if you switch from a fossil fuel or electric resistance to a new heat pump system. And there's also lots of other different rebates out there for different types of mechanical equipment, gas heating systems, gas water heaters, switching from a gas cooktop to an induction cooktop and things like that. But what you might not be as familiar with are these income eligible programs. And so the kind of middle column there that says income eligible, so those are not directly administered through kind of the standard Mass Save umbrella, but are rather administered through housing assistance corporations, as well as the lien network for larger multifamily buildings. And so those programs are for tenants or homeowners that are on an assisted rate code on their utility bills, a low income rate code. And so if you have a tenant or are a homeowner that has that low income rate code, then you're eligible to participate in the income eligible program and receive really great incentives to help weatherize your home. So that could include complete coverage of insulation. It could also include the full cost replacement of mechanical systems, which could possibly be air source heat pumps to heat and cool the home to replace a fossil fuel system. Um, the kind of next tier is that more moderate income level, where if you have a tenant or a household that falls under those kind of ranges of incomes in the enhanced residential program column, then there are enhanced incentives that are facilitated through the Mass Save program, where basically if you have your income verified to fall within this range, you become eligible for even more money than the standard $10,000 whole home heat pump rebate. As well as some additional other features through the Mass Save program that can help weatherize the home and electrify the home at the same time.
And can I ask? So if I have a 3-family, right, and I have a unit that when we calculate the income, and I would have to work with the tenants about this, right, to
Yep.
try to figure this out. But if they fit into these categories, then I would be able to access the enhanced incentives. And if all 3 of the tenants fit into these categories, which is, not uncommon in rental
Mm-hmm.
situations, I'd be able to access this 3 different times for each of the units.
Correct. Yeah. So the incentives that I'll talk about in the next slide will be for 1 to 4 unit buildings. And so if you have a 1 to 4 unit building, each unit would be eligible for its own incentive that could be up to $16,000 under the enhanced residential program for air source heat pump equipment per unit.
That's incredible. Want me to move forward, Derek?
Yeah, unless there's any other questions. Um, So this slide just kind of outlines what those enhanced incentives are. So like I said, the standard incentive is that $10,000, which is still quite a good chunk of money if you're replacing a fossil fuel system with an air source heat pump system. But again, if you have tenants that are falling within that kind of moderate income range, that opens them up or you up to these enhanced rebate amounts. So for example, if the kind of pre-existing fuel was a fossil fuel, oil, propane, or electric resistance, and you swap that out for an air source heat pump that meets the requirements. So it has to be a certain type of equipment that we know is going to be able to heat in our climate. And it has to be installed by a certain contractor. We call them HPIN contractors, stands for Heat Pump Installer Network, where basically we train those contractors up and make sure that they kind of know what they're doing when it comes to installing these types of equipment. Then you're eligible for that enhanced $16,000 incentive. To be able to kind of fall into that range for these enhanced incentives, there is a application process on the Mass Save website where basically your tenants would have to just verify their income with maybe like a W-2 or some sort of pay stub. And then once they get approved for those enhanced incentives, they would then get access to these when they apply for the heat pump rebates.
That's great. You know, Anne, remember Cape Ann Climate Coalition and Lisa Smith's email, because she can help you with this, and Derek can. So Derek and Lisa, eventually here, when you're done talking, if you wouldn't mind throwing your email into the chat, Lisa should definitely throw her email into the chat. If these things apply, you want to take advantage of them big time.
Yep, absolutely.
And the bottom one is ground source heat pumps. So what some people call geothermal, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So the ground source heat pumps, they're going to be more expensive, of course. So you do get a little bit more money, but you have to weigh the pros and cons. You're probably talking a much more expensive piece of equipment and installation as well for the ground source heat pump.
Oh, Lisa has her hand raised. Lisa, go ahead and open up your mic if you need to say something.
Okay, it's not Lisa, it's Susan.
Oh,
I just want to clarify. I just want to clarify this. If you go to the Mass Save application and you apply for this and you are low income, but you don't have any other information that you're low income, except maybe your tax, you're not approved for fuel assistance, you're not approved for SNAP, what do you do then?
I'm pretty sure that if you were verifying your income and it fell within the lower income threshold, then you would be directed to those housing assistance corporations. I'm not sure if they're specifically looking for the low income rate code on your utility bills. But
yeah, you know, it's okay if you already are identified and you already have an R2 or a SNAP or something, a Medicaid, but if you're not, a lot of elderly people just realize that they're in the low income and they have never applied for anything before. And we've found that it's hard to get them eligible for these rebates through Mass Save because there's no one there to verify it. They closed the fuel assistance program for 6 months. So then we have to wait 6 months for them to get approved. And you know how things go when you wait 6 months for something, it's very difficult. So I was hoping that you had a different way of verifying low income people without going through fuel assistance or SNAP or one of those programs.
And that's Susan Hogue talking, just so everybody knows. Susan and Lisa, I think the real Lisa has her hand up now, are the critical actors, and Mimi as well, for Cape Ann Climate Coalition. These are, you know, as Susan just pointed out, they know these programs really, really, really well, and they should be your first point of contact here. They know the other programs that Derek is also talking about, the lean programs. They know what's going on with Gloucester, which we're also going to be talking about as we go through here. So they need to be excellent first points of contact. Lisa, do you have your hand up, I think?
Yes, I just wanted to say with the income eligible programs, you do have to be on fuel assistance to access it. And if you have a tenant, if you're paying, if their heating's included in the rent, then they're not eligible, even if they fall within the income eligibility guidelines, they're not eligible. It has to be whoever's paying for the for the heating to be income eligible. So just to let you know a few things, if you're a landlord wondering, if you're paying for the heat, your tenants aren't eligible for the income eligible program. That's
Gotcha.
it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's unusual but it certainly happens in the marketplace. I'm going to go back to a question that Linda Stout had too. So let's say it's kind of the typical situation in the marketplace, Derek, that the tenants are in fact paying the electricity and heating bills, which is very, very common. Lisa's question is a good one. And Linda's question is a good one. Linda also pointed out earlier that there are cool people that live in Gloucester. I get that, absolutely, Linda. But she asked, so the tenant, not the landlord, makes the application for the rebates incentives, or is it how does that work? Is it?
Yeah, so
applies?
the tenant being within this income eligibility kind of opens the door for these enhanced incentives. But if you as a landlord are paying for the upgrades, so you're paying for the improvements, the new air source heat pump system, then you would be eligible for these rebates under the enhanced incentive amount. So you would have to do some coordination with your tenants to kind of apply for the eligibility for these enhanced incentives, but then you as the person who'd be paying for that upgrade would be able to receive the rebate amount in turn.
That makes perfect sense. So the coordination between the tenant and the landlord is another really good use case. Again, I wish we had a group like this in Melrose, but Cape Ann Climate Coalition. You want to coordinate the work between the tenants and the landlords so everybody understands what's going on here, and then it's going to be a benefit for you tenants living in this space. It's going to lower your operating costs, and it's going to be a benefit for you landlord. Use Lisa Smith and Cape Ann Climate Coalition to coordinate that kind of work. Lisa, you have a comment?
It's me again. I just want to tell people that our experience with landlords has been that they don't want to spend the time. They want the upgrades. They're willing to have them done, but they don't want the time talking to the tenants, getting the paper signed, doing all the work that you have to do to say that the tenant is not income eligible, but you can make him eligible. So you walk through the steps with them. They do not want to spend the time, and we've heard that time and time again. I think that's one of the biggest blocks in working with these tenants of low income. The money is there, but they don't want to spend the time. So I think that's a big barrier that people have to realize.
Absolutely. And I think that's where
Yeah.
you and Lisa can come in handy to help coordinate that message. It's tough. There's no question about it. A lot of challenges to engaging landlords on this stuff, but I think that's a real service that you guys can provide out there. No question about it. Great. And Linda says more than 50% of the tenant occupancy qualified under income eligible. Is the entire project eligible for the additional incentives?
Yeah, so I can actually kind of tell a little story about somebody who attended one of these meetings in the past, who reached out to me because they were doing a little bit of renovation work as well, but they had a 2-family house, and the landlord lived in one unit and the tenant lived in the other unit. And the tenant was income eligible and able to receive all kinds of incentives through those programs. And because 50% of the house was income eligible, the landlord's unit was also eligible for those discounted upgrades. So he was getting a new air source heat pump and fully weatherized throughout the existing portion of the home. And I mean, it was almost kind of like he won the lottery to some degree. I mean, he was getting really great incentives, great weatherization upgrades for no cost to him because of his income eligible tenant. So yeah, that's correct. If 50% of the building is income eligible, then they'll be able to take care of the whole building.
That's an incredible story coming out of one of these earlier meetings. That's fantastic, Derek. Should we go forward with the next slide?
Yeah, just one last comment that I want to add. So in addition to these rebates, the enhanced incentives also open up some additional money for remediation of roadblocks. So that might be things like asbestos, whether it's vermiculite insulation or asbestos on old steam pipes or asbestos siding or things like that, as well as knob and tube removal for the old wiring. And so that could be up to $7,000 of additional funds that would be available to remediate some of those issues. And older buildings that have tenants are very likely to have those issues. So that's a great additional resource through the program that you would get with these enhanced incentives.
That's really important in the real estate transaction too, Derek. We're seeing lenders out there that are very wary of knob and tube. So having that tackled before you go to sale is critically important in this marketplace right now.
Yep. Yeah, so just a quick plug here. So like I mentioned, I work specifically on a residential new construction program. And within that, we offer a renovations and additions program where if you have a building that's undergoing a major renovation, so you're completely redoing it, new insulation, new mechanical systems, those enhanced incentives may not apply, but we do have these performance-based programs where basically we provide you with incentives based on how much more energy efficient you make the building. So if you're interested, I am going to drop my email into the chat here. If you do have any projects that are upcoming that might fit the bill of a major renovation or addition, certainly feel free to reach out and I can see if we can assist in getting you some additional funds.
That's terrific, Derek. Thanks. And this was just recently announced too. If you're an Airbnb host or of an Airbnb host, there's some additional incentives due to this relationship between Abode Energy, a great company here in Massachusetts, and Airbnb. So you can see you can use Abode to go through the mass save process, but down at the bottom red down here, you'll see that you'll not only receive the $10,000 incentive from mass save, but an additional $2,000 incentive for switching to heat pumps as part of this new relationship with Airbnb. So, there's all kinds of these little programs popping up that are really surprising, coming from unique sources. This is just one of them. And then
just to
okay.
excuse me, Craig, I think that has been canceled. I just was on Airbnb the other day and it said that this promotion has been stopped. So I think it was through the summer.
Me. I'll check in with my contact at Abode and see what's up with that.
That's good. Yep.
Thank you. EV chargers becoming a bigger and bigger deal out there in the marketplace as well. We did on June 20th, the city of Gloucester did a program for EV charging for businesses and income producing properties. EVs are kind of the way the market is shifting right now. Having EV charging stations out on the end of Cape Ann and Gloucester and Rockport, businesses out there wanting to get electric vehicles out there, just some smart business opportunities to include EV charging stations that may even be public facing, right? That the public can use. Certainly as a business, as a restaurant, I would want that to be the case, but maybe even as a landlord, you might choose to go down that road as well. So there's a lot of incentives out there as well that are popping up in the marketplace.
Craig, could I just talk a little bit about the EV charger thing? Because they have a new program and it's called Turnkey. If you are a landlord with 1 to 4 units there, you can get the electrical installation and a charger for your house, even if none of your tenants have an EV or you don't have an EV. And it's part of their Make Ready program, because one of the biggest obstacles for low income people is they won't have any place to charge a car. So if you are a tenant and you have a multiple unit building, check into it, call Lisa, call myself, or call National Grid. It's just about to come on the, be ready to turnkey, and turnkey means you sign up for it. They make sure you apply, you have all the credentials, and then they just do it for you. They just do it. You don't have to think about it again. Because again, that's one of the hangups for landlords. They don't want to spend the time doing it. Okay,
Yeah,
that's all. I'm sorry,
absolutely.
I won't
No, that's
interrupt you
great,
again.
Susan. I appreciate you throwing that in there. Another good reason to contact Cape Ann Climate Coalition, so you see what's going on with all of this stuff. So, in homes with green improvements, when you as landlords or homeowners do decide to sell, we've got so much data that shows that they sell for more these days because more and more people are being aware of utility costs, of safer homes, of healthier homes, getting rid of natural gas cooktops because of the data that's coming out now about a lot of studies coming out now on how that impacts health and asthma rates for children. So there's a lot of information flooding this space right now. This is actually a home that I sold in Reading, Massachusetts several years ago now. And so when I'm teaching class to realtors, there's a guy here with a thermal imaging camera. So what is that thermal imaging camera actually doing? It's actually looking, this was a cold day, it was probably 30 degrees outside, maybe even a little bit more chilly than that. And the interior temperature was about 70. So with a thermal imaging camera, you can see where heat is escaping the house. And the heat is in red. The areas where there's less escape are the kind of blue areas. So the determination was that this building was in fact insulated, which was a priority for my buyer. So I ask realtors the question, do you think that I was lucky enough in this challenging marketplace to have a guy show up that was an energy assessor and have the home contingent upon an energy assessor? Or do you think it's a home inspector that has a thermal imaging camera? And many realtors say, well, you're not going to get an additional inspection done in this type of marketplace. So, they're seeing more and more home inspectors with this kind of equipment to evaluate the leaky house, the energy leaving the house. And I say, well, you're wrong. This is actually my buyer that brought his own thermal imaging camera to this showing. So look, people are thinking about this stuff. It's making an impact on home sales. I can absolutely guarantee you that. So funding these kinds of improvements, not only are there great incentives out there like the ones that Derek talked about with Mass Save, but there's also funding opportunities that are out there that are unique to this marketplace. So for instance, the city of Gloucester has a housing rehabilitation program, which is a 0% financing for owner-occupied 1 to 7 unit buildings. 0% financing, free money at a time when rates are, around 7% right now. And who knows, they may be going higher, they may come, hopefully they'll come down a little bit, but this is free money for homeowners to be able to take advantage of a City of Gloucester program in which you can really improve the energy efficiency of your home out there. CPACE, so Linda Stout is on. Linda, if you would unmute yourself and talk about CPACE. I know that this has been a big part of your life for the last bunch of years, getting this moved through the city of Gloucester and using mass development to be able to take advantage of financing opportunities for 5+ buildings in the city of Gloucester. Do you want to talk a little bit about this program, Linda?
Yeah, well, it is CPACE, which is commercial PACE. Since we have a couple people on the call from other states, I'll talk specifically to the state of Massachusetts. Most of the PACE programs are somewhat the same, but the T's and C's may be a little bit different. But under CPACE in Massachusetts, that does include multifamily, defined as 5 units and above. So landlords would with that type of property would qualify under this finance program. It's facilitated through the through mass development, and basically it's set up as a betterment on the property that is being improved. So if you have a residential property that you want to do all types of energy improvements, and that would include everything from your HVAC and lighting to solar to geothermal, all the soft cost assessments, everything is included in that. The financing is up to a 20-year term, and it's based on the energy savings that will be, the energy cost savings that will be realized over the term of the, call it the financing. So that the savings to investment ratio has to be always more than 1. So if your savings are, if your call it debt service is $100, the projected savings by a formula method that's provided under the program would have to be at least $101. And that's basically how it works. The betterment, it's not any, it can't be accelerated. In other words, if for some reason there were defaults on this property, and typically when you see in real estate, a default means that it's really crashed, it's gone into foreclosure at that point, but it can't be accelerated based on the terms of the agreement. It's secured by a loan on the property, and if there's a mortgage on the property, it does require the mortgagee waiver, their consent to allow this lien to be placed on the property. But the sale really is to the mortgage holder, is that you're improving the property, you're increasing the value of the property, and you're normally improving the cash flow because you're going to be incurring savings, and those savings will be more than sufficient to cover any debt service over the long, up to 20-year term of the financing. What's come new, just they've been working on it for a little bit over a year, is that now you can use this CPACE financing program for new construction. And that's something that hadn't been available before. And there's about 68 communities in the state of Massachusetts that participate in CPACE. In the state of Mass, it's done by each municipality has to approve it, each city and town, whereas some other states it's done at a county level or another type of district level. And that's basically the sale of it. I mean, basically you're getting long-term financing. They do have a list of capital providers, as they term them, that participate in PACE. The typical level of interest is usually a minimum of $250,000. However, any lender can qualify to participate in the PACE program. So if you had a smaller program and you have a relationship with a local bank, such as in our area, Cape Ann Savings comes to mind, they could actually participate in this. The city's participation is really only that they recognize the betterment on the property. So when the tax bill goes out to the property owner, that betterment assessment line item is on the property tax bill. They pay the property tax bill to the city of Gloucester. It's just a pass-through. Gloucester remits it to whoever they are directed to, the lender in this case, or typically it's going to end up going into a lockbox like a lot of other mortgage payments may go, or be, in fact, it can also be escrowed. But that's basically how it works.
And PACE stands for?
Property is, it's a kind of an odd name, but it's Property Assessed Clean Energy. It often gets confused. There's other low income programs available with the same acronym. So,
and the property assessed is essentially the lien, but the up to 250,000, which is a lot of money for an employer.
That's a minimum.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, but you can go less. It's just that the appetite to finance a smaller project isn't really out there in the bigger lending community.
Right.
But you're doing some very large commercial real estate projects under the PACE program. And the thing is, because you can go 20 years, so that allows you to do the more aggressive energy upgrades, more of your solar. You can even do windows, because it's blended. When you take all the energy savings. So lighting is what they call the low hanging fruit, and then you can take the other measures, whereas the geothermal is a much longer, expensive payback. But you can blend all the measures that you're installing into one calculation to come up with that savings to investment ratio.
That's incredible. And this was just news to me that you said, but this can be used in new construction for builders as well?
Yeah, they just came out with a bulletin on that in July, I believe. They've been working on it.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just send me that bulletin. That might be something that I can use
Certainly.
with some builders that I'm working
Okay.
with right now. That's great
Yeah.
information. Thank
Because
you.
again, like, you said, what's existing today may very well be around another 50 years, but every time we put something new in the ground, it just mushrooms or multiplies the problem if it's not an energy efficient facility to start with.
Yeah.
And so what they can do is, I don't know all the technical attributes of calculating for their new construction program, but I assume a lot of it has to do with avoided cost. And they probably also get credits for things like, greenhouse gas emission reduction and things like that.
Thank
And
you,
then, of
Linda,
course, there's all the tax credits that go with this.
right. Well, thank you for all your work on this. I know you've been leading this fray for a while now. And in my understanding, you have a new position now with the city?
Yeah, I started the end of May as the energy coach under the Mass Save Community First Partnership program. And so that involves or entails more working under the residential programs, and as some of what Derek spoke to, the incentives that are available for all residents and small businesses.
That's fantastic. Gloucester is doing such great work here. And look at all the resources on this presentation right now for you all to take advantage of. These are the people that know what's going on in the back end. This is just great stuff. Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then there is, so this is being used, I find, more and more in the marketplace, right? So if I'm representing some new buyers in the marketplace, particularly first-time buyers, right? And, there are competing offers on properties still to this day, even with interest rates as high as they are, because there's so little inventory. And for first-time buyers in particular, if you're looking at homes in the $400,000 to $600,000 category, which is, believe it or not, kind of entry-level single-family homes in Massachusetts, the competition for landing that home is intense. I mean, multiple offers virtually all of the time. And when there's multiple offers, even though we as realtors do not recommend waiving a home inspection, that is not a good idea. But in this marketplace, home buyers quickly learn that one of the ways that they can make their offer a little bit more enticing to a seller is to waive the home inspection. It's scary stuff, right? That first-time home buyers have to be thinking this way in this marketplace. But one of the things that's good to know after the point of sale, you set up your utility accounts. If you're in Gloucester, it's National Grid. In Melrose, it's National Grid. If you're more towards Boston, it's Eversource or investor-owned utilities. You have a home energy assessment done as soon as you've set up your utility accounts, right? Once you get into the home, right? And then you have access through the Mass Save Home Energy Assessment to something called a heat loan, which again is 0% financing. So for the poor buyer, right, out there, young person buyer that can't that just can't get a home inspection done, but you can look at this aging 25-year oil system that's in the home, oil furnace that's in a home. You know that that's at the end of its life. It doesn't take a home inspector to figure that out. And you know you've got liability after taking on this big loan moving into this house. Well, here's the cool thing. Go to Mass Save, get a home energy assessment done, get access to the Mass Save heat loan. Again, 0% financing, free money to be able to make improvements on that home, to switch to heat pumps, to get away from fossil fuels, or at least to get an upgraded natural gas system that's Energy Star rated. You know, that should be in the least thing that you do. So there's opportunities out here in this marketplace. And certainly if you own a home in Massachusetts and you want to make these improvements, the Mass Save Heat Loan is a great program to take a look at. Here's some more low-hanging fruit that the city of Gloucester has. So the city of Gloucester has a community electricity aggregation program. Many people know about it. Many people do not. The many people that do not, I think, are probably typically tenants. Now take a look at the prices per kilowatt hour on there. Gloucester Basic, 10.7 cents per kilowatt hour. Gloucester 100% Green, 14.356. Local Green, 11.071. Well, this last December in National Grid territory, when the rates went up due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which pushed up the natural gas prices, the utility rates were closing in on 40 cents per kilowatt hour. And some poor tenant that didn't know that the city of Gloucester had gotten into a long-term agreement with an energy supplier to keep the volatility out of the marketplace for an extended period of time. Usually they're 2 or 3 years. This one goes through, it looks like 2024, this fixed rate. They really got hit hard. I mean, as a landlord, you know, one way to create a good relationship with the tenants is make sure that they know about this program, the Community Electricity Aggregation Program. And again, you know, put them in contact with Lisa or Susan. They can help to put this together on behalf of your tenants, so they're not getting hit really hard in this volatile marketplace that we experience here in New England. There's also, and Susan does some great work on this, community solar options as well. So these are stackable. That program that I just talked about, that at 10.7 cents per kilowatt hour, you could also sign up for a community solar program and get 10 to 25% off from that low rate that you see up there, and you could go up essentially 100% green right there. So these are just great programs, and another reason to reach out to Lisa and Susan about the great work that the city of Gloucester is doing across the board here. There's Lisa right there. We're also, I think we're almost there, Brianna. The Landlord's Guide to Resilient Rentals is just about ready to come out. It looks fabulous. I just saw a working draft of this. We're about ready to release this. Everybody on this call that we've got your email, you will be receiving this at some point here in the near future. On the right, there's the beautiful Lisa Smith that you've heard so much about. She is the person that you definitely want to reach out to, because there are heat pump coaches that the city of Gloucester has. So guidance from volunteers that are, you know, have learned about how heat pumps work. They can help guide you through this process to learn about this technology that's literally revolutionizing the HVAC space. And as we said, scheduling a home energy assessment, it can be confusing. There's multiple players here. There's Lean, there's Action, there's Mass Save. Who do I go to? Contact Lisa and Susan. Get them involved so they can help guide you through the process. They know the players. They know the right places to go. Use them. That's what they're there for. And, you know, as I said, you know, you have your own homes. If you're a landlord, maybe you live in the property like the one that reached out to Derek and was able to take advantage of those great incentives, but you might own your own single family. And again, check out that Rewiring America IRA calculator to see what you might be able to take advantage of in terms of this really great climate package that was signed into law by President Biden exactly 1 year ago today. In fantastic legislation. It is, the incentives for homeowners are very clear, but also for businesses. So this Inflation Reduction Act, the latest estimate that I've seen is there are now manufacturing facilities for things like solar and battery storage opening up because of this Inflation Reduction Act and the incentives for manufacturers that have added 170,000 jobs in the United States of America in the first year of this program, and adding manufacturing facilities in some of the reddest of states. It's not only blue states that are taking advantage of this. President Biden is trying to make this work for everybody out there. So just a really, really great program. So that's it. That's my contact information there. I'll certainly open it up for questions or comments if anybody has some. I know we're right at 7:30, but there might be a few additional questions that we can certainly answer. If not, we'll make sure, this is recorded, so we're going to get it out to the full database. Lisa and Susan also have a database for the landlords in the city of Gloucester. And one of the things that we talked about in a past presentation is you really want to record your improvements. That's a great use for Lisa and Susan as well, to be able to make sure that they know what improvements that you're making on your property, so that we can have a long-going database about the things that you've done for your income producing property and new opportunities as they pop up, so that they can contact you about them. Again, Cape Ann Climate Coalition, awesome work. So pleased to be part of this project with you all, and keep up the good work.